Welcome to Brussels Forum 2020. We are pleased to introduce the Vice President for Foreign Policy at the German Marshall Fund, Dr. Ian Lesser.
Good morning and good afternoon from Brussels. Welcome back to Brussels Forum in a virtual format this year. This is week 3. We had a fantastic set of conversations last week, broadly on global issues and transatlantic relations. And this week we shift gears slightly to talk about the challenges affecting societies on both sides of the Atlantic. Let me just at the outset thank our partners, our founding partners, Daimler and the Belgian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, our forum partner, Deloitte, and all our associate and supporting and knowledge partners. We're really very grateful to them. We could not put on Brussels Forum without you. Today, as I say, we're going to start our series looking at challenges facing societies of all kinds under the current conditions, and they're very severe, obviously. Health challenges, economic challenges, political challenges. And we're very pleased to open this set of conversations with a special conversation today with Minister Jens Spahn, Germany's Federal Minister of Health. And he will talk to us in a moment about, have a conversation with us about how Germany has been facing the COVID crisis and how he sees the future. Minister, thank you very much for being with us. We're really delighted also today to have Katrin Bennhold, you're a Berlin correspondent for the New York Times, with us to moderate this conversation. Katrin, thank you for being with us. And I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce the minister and to moderate our conversation. But thanks all for being with us again, and we look forward to the discussion. Thanks.
Mr. Minister, thank you very much for joining us for this conversation. You are, I have to tell you, my very first public Zoom interview, and I really look forward to the experience. I even dressed up for the occasion. I got out of my pajamas, and I can see you did too. So that's a good start. We will talk for about 20 minutes. It's very hard to make jokes, by the way, on Zoom, because you can't really hear if anybody is laughing. And being German, I'm particularly insecure about this, but never mind. 20 minutes of conversation, and then I'm hoping to sort of relay some of the questions coming in from the audience. I encourage anyone watching to please submit your questions over Twitter, hashtag Brussels Forum. Anything that's coming in, I can see on my screen, and I will try to do my best to pick some of the best questions out for the health minister later. Mr. Spahn, I hear you do at least occasionally read the New York Times, so you will know well that we are not shy to hammer Germany whenever it deserves it. We write about a certain pipeline from Russia or about the 2% of GDP target for military spending, which Germans love to talk about but not meet. But when it comes to pandemic management, it's been an impressive run of shockingly positive news. Even our most conservative columnists at the New York Times now want Angela Merkel to become Joe Biden's running mate. Now, health is your patch. A lot of countries these days are looking to Germany for lessons. And I wonder, what can Germany learn from its own success? Let's start with that question.
Well, Katrin, Ian, first of all, thank you for having me in this new kind of, it's not a new forum, but a new way. I think it's the first time it's digital. So perhaps next year we can be very analog in Brussels again, but nevertheless, what can Germany take? First of all, I always say, let's be grateful and humble and not overconfident, because actually, yes, we had the chance to start from a very strong base in our healthcare system. We had more than 15 years of not cutting in the healthcare system. We had the chance with good labs, with good researchers, actually to have a good infrastructure and experience to start with. But you could see how fast, actually, how quick it went, or it could have gone. I remember very well having talked to my Spanish colleague in Brussels on the last council that took place in Brussels, Health Ministers Council. And back then it was only Italy we focused on. And just less than 10 days later, actually, we saw what was going on in Madrid, and just within days. So actually we were luckily enough to have been hit relatively late. And so we had time to prepare. And that is what I keep on telling our people too. Yes, so far we have managed this crisis well, and we had a good base to start from, but nevertheless, we had some luck too.
sort of picking you up on this idea of preparing. I mean, we've sort of gone through the first wave. We're now sort of, the tsunami, we've sort of survived this. We're now in open water, as one virologist put it to me, and we're learning how to swim. People talk about that second wave as a possibility coming up in the fall in all of our countries. As you're preparing for that eventuality, what would you say, given the experience that Germany has had and doing well on the numbers, at least in large Western liberal democracies, doing very well, what would you say are the key sort of 3 points now in terms of preparing for the fall?
Well, first of all, I'm very much convinced if we do it right, it's not a wave like we might expect it to be. It's not a tsunami just out of sudden and it's just happening. If we do it right, we will see it coming and we will see it growing early enough to react. And for that, first of all, we need testing to keep up testing capacities. As I said, in Germany, we were lucky to traditionally have a very good network of labs all over the country that actually could do testing from the very beginning. And we even managed to increase testing capacities to more than 1 million now. And though numbers are down in Germany, today it was 200 new cases in the official statistic. We actually want to increase testing and want to keep that for the upcoming months. And that is what I think is important for all of us, that we have this flashlight into the dark, to say it that way, all of the time, to see from the very beginning if there is any new local outbreak and then to really stop it immediately. Second, well, we put all our efforts into studies for vaccination as well as for treatment. Some say the only solution is a vaccine. I would say there is a second one, a good treatment that would help us to avoid actually the heavily developing cases that need ventilation, for example. So actually we want to do studies as much as possible and to support them all over Europe. For that, European network is extremely helpful. For in a country like Germany with this low number of cases, actually you can't have really good studies because there are not enough patients, and for that it makes sense to really cooperate in this. And of course, we just keep some of our ICU beds empty for the upcoming months. Traditionally, we have many ICU beds here in Germany. We asked hospitals to postpone elective operations. They did so. So still, as of today, we still have 10,000 empty ICU beds. I want them to go back to kind of new normal and to do the operations, but at the same time to keep some beds empty so we are prepared for whatever happens.
Just briefly on the vaccinations, because we've had the news now that Germany is investing 300 million in CureVac, a German vaccine maker. We've seen Germany participate in an international consortium to secure vaccine doses for Germans going forward from AstraZeneca. What's your best guess, with all the information that you have, at when we will have a marketable vaccine to be used on a mass scale?
Well, if I might, Katrin, just one or two points before that one, but I will do that immediately. First of all, we are investing as a state, as Germany, into CureVac. That's true, because we want to keep this company for Germany and Europe as one that is actually preparedness for future pandemics, because they have a technology like others do too, that actually makes it possible to have much, as we see right now with mRNA technology, to have much faster developments of vaccines. And so that is not just for Corona, this is really preparedness for the future, to have this kind of infrastructure of technology here.
And perhaps also to signal to some other countries in the world that CureVac is not for sale.
Well, it's not only about CureVac. Actually, it's in this we see, especially between, of course, the bipolar world of China and the US, actually, that somehow are there with their ongoing struggles, WHO, whatever, that Europe has to become more independent in all of this. I mean, it should not be decided in China if we have protective masks for nurses in Amsterdam or Warsaw or Berlin. We should be able to to produce them on our own. So there are certain areas where I'm very much convinced of we need more European independency and investments here in Europe, and CureVac is just a small part of this strategy. And I'm very happy that last Friday in the Health Ministers' Council we agreed once more, and that shall be an important point of our presidency to focus on that one. Second, this contract we signed with AstraZeneca this weekend was a contract for Italy, France, the Netherlands and Germany on behalf of all. That is what I find very important. From the first second on, we said we are not just doing it for our people in the 4 states, we do it for all 27. We do the risk sharing now, the 4 countries, the upfront financing, but all member states, if they want to, can benefit related to their population. And that is a very important signal. It's the idea of the European of pioneers. Actually, some do what somehow needs to be done, but to the benefit of all, because what we saw is that this pledging conferences, CEPI, Gavi, whatever, I absolutely, and we as Germany do financially too, support these initiatives, but they are all not focusing on securing vaccination for the European population. So we want to help all other regions of the world, but we need to secure vaccines for us ourselves too, because then people start to ask, why do they have it, but not us? And if you ask, or when you ask about when, well, from today's point of view, I would say there is a chance that we have it in this year. The first vaccines, there's a chance. But with vaccination and research in vaccines, there can always something occur that actually that just leads to failure. So actually, I would never say any date, but we are very optimistic that there could be something within this year, at least the first companies. But there are several, I would say 5 to 8 that are far ahead right now, and we need them all, by the way, for all the billions actually of doses that we really need to vaccine all people.
It's interesting you bring up Europe, and of course in the early days of the pandemic, as Germany was already succeeding very well in managing it and containing it, one thing that Germany was criticized for was that all this sort of generosity at home wasn't really matched by generosity in Europe, and that there was a sense that this very rich and powerful nation was doing a great job at home, but wasn't necessarily living up to its own ideal of Europe's interest being sort of Germany's interest. And I want to sort of pick you up on this idea that there is now this push for a of solidarity. How realistic really is that? I mean, one of the big issues going into what is likely to be a serious economic crisis across the continent is that there will be big differences in how serious that crisis is. And some countries will recover faster than others. Germany has much more, it can afford a much bigger stimulus, so will probably come out of this crisis quicker than, say, Italy. Is that a threat to European unity? And does Germany have a responsibility to help other European partners beyond the European stimulus package that is being discussed?
Well, first of all, yes, you're right. At the very beginning, once again in a crisis, European Union didn't seem to be that sorted. And we were all very much focused on our national problems. That's true. But nevertheless, I would say quickly we managed to pull things together. But I had that conversation very often, very frankly, with my Italian or Spanish or French colleague, that of course we wanted, and we were, by the way, as supporting as possible, donating of ventilators, masks, taking patients from abroad to Germany, intensive care. But at the same time, I had that debate, and it's about mutual understanding that when we had come into a situation that we had given ventilators away, that we might have needed ourselves, and then the German people ask, why did you give that to another country instead as keeping us for us? That is a very hard debate to have. But for that, I've found it very important to really talk about this and exchange views with my colleagues in the other countries. So we really had this frank debates on how far can we go and actually be responsible for our own people as a national minister of health, and at the same time support each other. and we always try to find the right balance. And I absolutely accept you saying that could have been more balanced, kind of. And today I would say we could have taken more ICU patients. Yes, from today's point of view, definitely. But back then in March, when we had to decide how many within the first days, you always had in mind, what if your own people ask you, at least in the border regions, why is there no bed for me anymore? So we really need to find the right balance then. For the stimulus package, I definitely support it, and you see that it's a new approach for Germany too, that we have actually the money needed to invest. And I see the risk, as you actually said it, that there is an imbalance, once again, actually, you have to say, in how quickly and how far all the member states are recovering from this crisis. And it would not be helpful, and to make that very clear, and we know that as a German government and as Germans, that if it is only Germany and 2 or 3 others really to recover, and the rest not, that would not be helpful actually, for not just for the coherence, but for the emotions too, actually, for this feeling of being one big big family, actually. And that is why we want to be supportive, not just in words, but with this package, for example, and beyond. But one thing remains,
just to sort of almost be quite kind of blunt about it, do you think that this pandemic is going to be a moment that we might look back to as an important moment in Europe's history? I mean, do you think this is a make or break moment? Do you think this is a chance? Do you think this could be Europe's moment?
Well, of course, there's definitely a chance, but I don't see it as a Hamilton moment, as others in our government did, to put it that way. What I see, it's a new quality, of course. But what still, and you know perhaps that I was State Secretary of Finance before this post, and one thing remains, that it's not enough to have cheap money or big amounts of money. It still needs to be invested. And you still need to have projects, and you still need to have administrative structures that are actually capable to deal with the money and to get the best out of it. And that remains an issue. So as far as I see it, an issue for Germany itself, by the way, too. So what we really need is not just big amounts of money or cheap money. What we need is actually defining the right projects to invest it in. Projects that actually have an added value for all European citizens, for the economy, for growth, for the upcoming 20s. And sometimes I'm not sure if we are not too much focusing on just the amount, how big the bazooka is, but no one is really focusing on actually where are we investing this money so that it really makes a difference.
I think some of the kids I interviewed in Brandenburg recently about homeschooling and the attempt to get a broadband connection in near Golzow might agree that there's a case to be made to push for a digitization in Germany rather sooner than later. So there's a good idea. But I just want to sort of ask you a much broader question.
I'd say that's a good example. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think?
I just wanted to say that's a good example. That it's not just the money, because that there is no reception in Brandenburg is not a money issue. It's a planning issue.
Yes. No, exactly. And I think those people would completely agree, and they sort of despair slightly at all this talk of those reforms that haven't happened yet. But this may be a wake-up moment that changes that. Some people are sort of describing the pandemic as a kind of accelerator of history, if you will, something that speeds up trends that were already unfolding before, like a certain amount of deglobalization and automation that we'd already seen after the financial crisis a decade ago, and a certain sort of decline of the West, a shifting of power from West to East. So I guess one question I have is, when we come out of this crisis, hopefully in 2021, will we actually be in 2030? Will the world actually have sort of fast forwarded? Will the world be more Asian? What do you think are going to be the big tectonic sort of changes and shifts that will unfold in this kind of Zeitraffer, in this kind of accelerator of history?
Well, first of all, I want to stress actually that we have shown in Europe that liberal democracies can deal with this corona crisis at least as well as authoritarian regimes, because sometimes every now and then I see this thesis that authoritarian regimes can deal better with such a challenge, and I would say no. Our value actually, and our plus is that we have the citizens aside. Actually, what we have managed to do in all over Europe was only possible because the citizens wanted to do it with us, and that they actually understood why, and that they said, yes, let's do it. Let's keep distance. Let's wear a community mask and stuff. And so actually, I would say with as liberal democracies and as democracies that actually believe in science and in ratio and enlightenment, actually we have shown so far that we can manage this at least as good as other regimes do. And second, for the next 10 years, when it comes to the tectonics on the world, as you put it, it's not about equidistance, by the way. I find that very important. You have some people that always say Trump, Russia, and China, and I would never put the US and China and Russia in one context. That's definitely something different. Every now and then you need to tell some people here in Germany that there is still a difference in some important difference. But nevertheless, what we see is that Europe needs to, I mean, we talk about this for years already, but that there is really an urge need for sovereignty and become more sovereign, and not just for medicines and drugs, as I just put it, with manufacturing it here. It's about economy. I mean, that I had to ask Apple and Google actually to make my Corona warning app going, actually, to make it possible to make it happen is not something I really love to do. That actually I'm depending on US companies if to develop something here or not. So 5G, the actually debate on 5G is not if it is secure or not. The question is, why are we not able to build something like that in Europe anymore on our own? I mean, we used to do that. So I would say what we've seen is that I'm an absolute fan of international trade and globalization, but we need to find the right degree of globalization to re-degree kind of globalization, and to find those areas where we actually want to bring back some manufacturing, for example, back home to Europe. And at the same time, last point, for example, within the WHO, which is actually, we are here in the health ministry, are the leading ministry for the WHO in Germany. And you see this situation between China and the US. And at the same time, we see that the European contributors, financially and politically, are actually bigger than the two if we act together. And so what I really want to is, and that is long talk again for years, but now we need just to do it. That actually within the WHO, there's one European voice. And that is important for Germany. We need to accept it, but all of us need to, so that we really can have a difference within these international organizations.
One thing that struck me in what you said when you sort of described very eloquently how liberal democracies have actually proven themselves to be resilient in this crisis, more so than initially in the early stages of the crisis some people feared, who were pointing to sort of the speed with which a dictatorship can sort of shut down a city or close borders. But at the same time, the question that raises itself in my head is, if you are realizing at this point in time, we need to be united as a Europe going forward in a world where you have powers like the United States and China. At the same time, you are relying as a liberal democracy on the cooperation and goodwill of your citizens. As you said, that's a crucial ingredient, that trust, that people actually follow what your guidelines and trust in your science. It is at a time when we're heading into an economic crisis, something that's fragile. And I wonder to what extent the protests in Germany that we've seen and some of the sort of doubts that have come up, and that very anecdotally I experience almost every day from the sort of hippie pediatrician of my children who's from Schöneberg and who sort of says, all of these restrictions, you know, it's totally exaggerated, to the taxi driver, actually 2 taxi drivers in one day recently when I actually took a trip, which is rare these days, both of them in the morning and the evening, nothing to do with each other, both telling me it's just the flu, it's just a fake, it's a lie. So, you know, to what extent, having experienced 2015 and the kind of rise of doubt and distrust and Pegida, to what extent do you see parallels, or to what extent must one be on guard in Germany for a scenario like that, even if we're not there yet?
Well, first of all, you see once again, there's no glory in prevention, because of course people say, look, there are not more deaths than last year, so obviously they're just a flu. But then always we can say, well, just look to our neighbors and you can see that it's more than that. It has been more than that, and that actually we can be happy that we have managed to avoid the situation we have seen in other countries. But of course, if the avoided catastrophe is always hard to explain. But nevertheless, yes, what we see again is this polarized situation. I don't know how much that counts for all other European societies, but we see it in some, and in Germany especially too. And what is important is actually that all arguments, of course, can be said, and that there is an exchange. I mean, these were the biggest restrictions of freedom, of liberal rights in the history of the Federal Republic. And I would have been worried actually if there had been no debate and no doubt. But the question is, how do we debate? Is it a debate that actually wants to exchange views and tries to understand each other? There's the pneumologist actually that just had a COVID-19% just surviving. And then there is the taxi driver who asks, well, where are my clients? And it's just a flu. And they still need to be able to talk to each other and to understand the different positions and approaches that are there. And as soon as we lose that there's only echo chambers actually not exchanging with each other anymore, then we go back to that situation that we have seen after the refugee crisis and around migration. And by the way, not touching the content of the debate in the US right now. But I fear what you see once again is that there are big parts of society that are not able to really talk to each other anymore. And I want to avoid that here as much as possible. And that needs debate.
I've mentioned Corona as a kind of accelerator of history. Some say that it may also be an accelerator of your personal career, Mr. Spahn. Do you think that this crisis has sort of prepared you to take the top job in this country one day soon?
First of all, I mean, I just turned 40 2 or 3 weeks ago, and it's in some months. So actually, yeah, this was a time full of experience and makes you kind of humble, actually. And you really feel that you, with your decision in big uncertainty, you make a difference for people that way or that way. So I'd say I've learned a lot. But that what I've learned actually for the upcoming months, I want to use as a Minister of Health.
Maybe one final question that has actually come in now into the Q&A thing. In a 1-minute answer, perhaps there is an anonymous question. US health experts, the questioner asks, fear that even once a vaccine is developed, not all Americans will be willing to get vaccinated, judging that the risks to them is limited. Do you foresee that being a problem in Germany? It's sort of the anti-vaxxer question, and some of that does exist in Germany. Are you worried about that?
I'm not worried about that. That will happen, that there are people that really are actually activists against vaccination in general. I mean, that is what we see worldwide. And the WHO, before Corona, already said that's one of the biggest health threats of the world, these anti-vaccine movements. But nevertheless, I see at the same time that because perhaps they are not as outspoken as the others, that there are many, many people that actually have seen once again, experienced once again the benefit of vaccination. That is one of the biggest invention of humankind, actually, that we have vaccines available for so many diseases. And that if there is one for this one, I'm sure the big majority will get vaccinated. There's still one question we need to answer with science is for how long will you be immune, for example, after you have been vaccinated, how often does it need to be redone? But that is something that is practical then. So in general, I would say the big majority will get vaccinated, and the one who doesn't want to, okay, that's okay. It's a personal decision, but as long as the majority gets vaccinated, it makes a difference.
So you're going to get vaccinated?
Definitely. I have all the vaccinations you can get on the world, actually. My husband is always a bit worrying because might be over-vaccinated. No, I do all the vaccinations even more than actually are empfohlen, recommended.
Yeah. Mr. Spahn, thank you so very much for your time. I know you're a very busy man these days. It's been a very fascinating half an hour. Thank you on behalf of the Brussels Forum, and good luck going forward.
Thank you. All the best for your conference. Bye-bye.
Bye.